Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the latest on our interstellar visitor, 3I/Atlas. After weeks of us wondering and speculating, we finally have a visual confirmation. But, as you'll see, it kind of raises as many questions as it answers.
Right, so after it got pretty close to Mars back on October 3rd, the object just vanished. It flew right behind the sun, totally lost in the glare, and that kicked off this period of really intense speculation about its path and, what it even is. So let's break down what we actually know.
So here's the plan. We're going to start with the mystery of its disappearance, then talk about how it was rediscovered. After that, we'll confirm that its path is behaving exactly like it should. And then, things get interesting. We'll look at a pretty wild theory from our source about its effect on our sun, and finally, we'll check out a forecast for the coming weeks that seems to tie all of this together.
Okay, so as 3I/Atlas was cruising through our solar system, it was headed for this point called superior conjunction. Now that's really just a fancy way of saying it was on the complete opposite side of the sun from us here on Earth. That big moment happened on October 21st, and for weeks the sun's light just made it absolutely impossible to see anything. It was a total cosmic blind spot for us.
But then, just when the mystery was really at its peak, someone made a faint, but let me tell you, an absolutely crucial sighting. It was this tiny little blip of light buried in a sea of data, and it changed everything.
So, get this, an amateur astronomer from Thailand, a guy who was known for finding comets, started digging through raw data from a satellite's coronagraph. That's a tool they use to block out the sun's intense glare. And, boom! There it was. He spotted this faint little object moving way faster than the background stars, right where all the scientific models predicted it should be. Just an amazing piece of work.
And this sighting, it's so much more than just a fun game of cosmic hide-and-seek. It lets us finally, definitively confirm what's really going on with 3I/Atlas's movement through our solar system. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because this slide just completely debunks all the crazy rumors that were flying around. People were saying it had changed course, that it was doing some kind of intelligent maneuver. Nope, this coronagraph imagery confirms its path is totally normal. It's following the exact trajectory that was calculated months ago. No surprises there.
So here's the bottom line. Its acceleration is exactly what you'd expect from basic physics. As it gets closer to the sun's gravity just pulls it in faster and faster. It's going to hit its top speed, a whopping 68 kilometers per second, at its closest point to the sun on October 29th. It's behaving just like any interstellar object on a predictable path should. Case closed, right? Well, not exactly.
Because here is where the story takes a really sharp turn. The object's path might be normal, totally predictable, but our source material suggests that what was happening on the sun at the exact same time was anything but normal. Right around the time of its superior conjunction, when 3I/Atlas was hidden behind the sun, our star just unleashed 3 massive, back-to-back coronal mass ejections. We're talking about gigantic explosions of plasma erupting into space. And here's the thing. These weren't just random. These explosions came from sunspots on the far side of the sun, the side that was directly facing the interstellar object. The source points out that they were pretty much aimed right at 3I/Atlas's location. And these were some of the biggest solar storms we've seen this entire solar cycle. That's a heck of a coincidence.
So this raises a fascinating question, and it's one the source really dives into. How could this happen? I mean, we're talking about an object that, at its biggest estimate, is maybe 50 kilometers wide. Its gravitational pull is practically nothing compared to the sun. So the answer being proposed, it has nothing to do with gravity.
And this really gets to the core of the theory. Instead of gravity, which is great at governing the slow, steady orbits of planets, the idea is that we should be looking at a different force. In a universe that's just swimming in plasma and energy, the force that really runs the show is electromagnetism. And it's about 1,000 trillion times more powerful than gravity. It's not even a fair fight.
So, the author of our source suggests that 3I/Atlas, with its unique cloud of plasma, its coma, is basically creating a short circuit in the solar system's electrical grid. Think of the whole solar system as this vast electrical circuit. The theory is that this foreign object, with its own weird plasma field, comes in and disrupts that circuit, and that triggers this massive energy release from the sun, those CMEs we saw. The source also gives us another way to think about it, suggesting the object's unique resonance is the key. The idea is that because it comes from a totally different star system, its fundamental energy signature, its frequency, is completely alien to ours. And in this view, the sun is just reacting to a vibration, a frequency that it has never, ever encountered before.
So, what does this all mean for us back here on Earth? Well, this is where the source connects these huge solar events to a very specific and potentially very active time window for our planet coming up in early November.
The timeline here, as laid out by the source, is just critical. On October 29th, the object is at its closest to the sun, peak interaction. Then, in early November, those monster sunspots that were firing off CMEs are predicted to rotate around and face Earth. And all of this is happening right as we get the biggest, brightest supermoon of the entire year on November 5th.
And according to the source, this isn't just any old full moon. It's going to be incredibly close to Earth, creating this perfect Sun-Earth-Moon alignment right inside our planet's magnetic field. And the thinking is that alignment, combined with any solar storms that get thrown our way from those angry sunspots, could really amplify geomagnetic disturbances and maybe even trigger seismic activity.
And so, this is the thought we're left with. The hard data, the facts, show an interstellar visitor on a perfectly normal, predictable path. But the theories presented in the source material suggest its influence could be creating these massive ripples across the entire solar system. It's a really powerful reminder that there is still so much we just don't understand, and it's a pretty great reason to keep watching the skies.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we are digging into the really quite extraordinary events surrounding the interstellar object 3I Atlas. Now, we have a stable trajectory. Visual confirmation puts it precisely where models expected, and it's accelerating toward its October 29th perihelion, going to hit about 68 kilometers per second. So, this really dispels a lot of the public speculation about its physical path changing wildly.
The trajectory is stable, yes, I agree. But the reaction from the sun is, well, it's anything but stable, isn't it? The critical data point I think we both agree is that series of 3 massive back-to-back-to-back coronal mass ejections, these CMEs, launched from the far side. And they seem perfectly targeted toward 3I Atlas, right around its superior conjunction on October 21st. The sun, it effectively seemed to be short-circuited.
Right, short-circuited. And the crucial question here is, well, it's truly staggering when you think about it. How does an object, which is, barely a speck in cosmic terms, maybe 5 kilometers, maybe 50 kilometers across at the widest estimate, how does it manage to essentially punch a hole in the sun's magnetosphere and trigger 3 of the largest energetic releases we've seen this entire solar cycle? Now, I maintain that this entire phenomenon is best explained through a rigorous, complex electromagnetic interaction, something based squarely in astrophysical plasma dynamics.
That's certainly a necessary perspective, I grant you, especially given the observed energy release. But I believe that while electromagnetism is clearly the vector for the energy transmission, the cause, the fundamental trigger, it really requires a more holistic explanation, one that has to incorporate the object's unique, ancient resonance and, well, what I'd call its informational fields.
I see why you might think that, looking for something beyond the standard model. But let me give you a different perspective, one grounded firmly in the measurable forces of the solar system. First off, we can immediately discount gravitational interaction, right? The gravity of 3 Atlas is just negligible compared to the sheer mass of the sun. So we must therefore look to electromagnetism, which is empirically, 10 to the power of 36 times more powerful than gravity. It completely dominates the dynamics of the plasma environment that makes up, 99.9% of the visible universe?
A powerful force indeed, no argument there. But merely pointing to the magnitude of the force, well, it doesn't automatically explain the mechanism of scaling, does it? How does small trigger big?
But that's where the object's structure comes in. See, 3A Atlas isn't just an inert rock. We know it possesses a complex, dusty plasma coma. And drawn conceptually from the work of plasma pioneers like Hans Alfvén, we understand that space isn't empty. It's a vast, complex electric circuit. So, when this highly charged, relatively small but extremely fast object tears through the inner solar system, it interacts with established current sheets and magnetic field gradients. It acts like an extreme impedance mismatch, causing a massive local current disruption. Effectively, it creates a short circuit in the normal electric circuit dynamics of the sun. This framework, it offers a quantifiable physical explanation for how a charged object, even a small one, can act as a catalytic trigger for releasing immensely powerful, pre-existing solar energy stored in the coronal magnetic fields. The mechanism is a physical plasma-based one.
And importantly, the object is accelerating normally, as expected, gravitationally, plus solar radiation pressure. This contradicts any suggestions of, exotic propulsion or alien technology, leaving us pretty squarely with non-gravitational physics, specifically electromagnetism, as the necessary explanatory model.
Focusing solely on a localized plasma short circuit, it just feels potentially too narrow to capture the profound influence of an object that is truly anomalous. I mean, it's only the third confirmed interstellar visitor we've ever seen. You mentioned its plasma coma, okay, but let's look closer at the deep space characteristics it carries. It has the deepest negative polarization curve ever observed, which is odd, an unusual nickel to iron ratio, suggesting maybe structured high-density matter, and that really strange, persistent sunward-facing tail observed back in the summer. These aren't typical comet behaviors. These are indicators that this object has traveled, potentially, for billions of years from some unknown, ancient system. It's carrying completely non-native material and structure into our established local environment. So, I come at it from a different angle. I argue that 3 Atlas carries a unique resonance or frequency, something fundamentally coupled to an information field that's entirely distinct from our local solar cluster. Now, this isn't mysticism. Conceptually, we could relate this to advanced scalar physics, perhaps, or the idea that highly structured exotic matter disrupts the local zero-point energy environment, or maybe establish standing wave patterns in the solar system's toroidal fields. And this inherent difference in resonance, that acts as the catalyst for systemic change. It triggers not just the solar activity, but also the subsequent powerful terrestrial effects, like the predicted high-magnitude earthquakes and geomagnetic disturbances we might be seeing. The influence, I believe, operates at a systemic, energetic level, offering a more holistic explanation that moves beyond sort of limited localized plasma physics.
Okay, let's focus rigorously on the solar activity itself, though, because that provides the most direct physical evidence of the interaction. The coronagraph imagery, it leaves very little doubt that 3 Atlas was the apparent target of those 3 back-to-back CMEs. That specificity, it strongly suggests a direct physical electromagnetic interaction at the plasma level, not some kind of general field disturbance. And we have seen historical precedent, which really reinforces this physical model. Look back at Oumuamua in 2017. We saw an unprecedented cluster of double-digit X-class flares clustered precisely around its perihelion passage. This pattern, it strongly suggests a recurring, physically triggered phenomenon when these charged interstellar objects transit close to the sun. We are observing, I think, the physical consequence of plasma physics on a celestial scale.
That's a compelling argument for historical correlation, and I absolutely agree the electromagnetic connection is undeniable as the effect. But correlation doesn't equal singular causality, does it? Have you really considered the broader, simultaneous systemic timing here? This exceptional solar activity, it's tied not just to the CMEs themselves, but to the exact timing of the superior conjunction, a major energetic alignment in its own right. And it's near conjunction with Uranus. And Uranus is often correlated astrologically and perhaps energetically with disruption and rapid change. More importantly, this entire sequence is timed almost perfectly with the arrival of the biggest and brightest supermoon of the year on November 5th and 6th. We know that geometrically maximizes gravitational and tidal stress on the Earth's crust, and it affects our magnetotail.
You are describing systemic alignments, okay? But these are often coincidental, aren't they? They aren't generally accepted as sufficient primary causal mechanisms in astrophysics.
But the resonance model naturally encompasses these interconnected dynamic systems. If the influence of 3I Atlantis is strictly a localized electromagnetic short circuit,
happening way out near the sun. How can that mechanism fully account for the predicted global seismic spike we're anticipating down here on Earth? We've been in a notable drought of magnitude 6 or greater earthquakes, right? The solar activity coincides with a period where the entire solar system is saturated with relativistic ion flux from those CMEs, and Earth is simultaneously being primed for a massive release by the closest supermoon in years. This level of systemic activation across multiple dynamic systems, solar, planetary, lunar, it just feels like it requires more than just a localized plasma interaction way out by the sun.
Okay, I can certainly incorporate the supermoon influence and the geomagnetic priming into my framework. They can act as enhancers. They lower the required threshold for the seismic trigger, make the Earth more susceptible. But the initial massive energy release, those CMEs, that still points directly back to the physical interaction at the sun, which leads me to the most critical contention, the credibility and, frankly, the scale of the proposed causal mechanism.
I'm sorry, but I'm still struggling with the idea that the term short circuit adequately describes the energy transfer dynamic involved here. We're talking about CMEs described as one of the largest of this solar cycle. That requires the sudden, immense dissipation of magnetic energy stored in the sun's plasma fields. Now, if 3I Atlas is only, 5 to 50 kilometers across, how can its localized, transient plasma coma possibly sustain a circuit dynamic sufficient to release that level of energy? It just suggests a massive energy transfer, and the electromagnetic model, as you've presented it so far, leaves that scaling mechanism feeling conceptually, vague.
That is the absolute core of the disagreement, I agree, and it does require a deeper look into plasma physics. The small physical size of the object is misleading if we ignore the immense electromagnetic potential of the environment it's flying through. We are not suggesting that 3I Atlas generates the energy itself. It acts as a minuscule, highly concentrated trigger that releases solar energy already stored in the sun's coronal magnetic fields. The mechanism is likely magnetic field line reconnection, driven by an external charged object. When 3I Atlas, carrying presumably a unique charge, interacts with the ambient solar wind and the sun's magnetic current sheets, it creates extreme shear stresses locally. These stresses can drive rapid, explosive magnetic reconnection events, where immense amounts of stored magnetic energy are converted almost instantaneously into kinetic and thermal energy, launching the plasma outward as a CME.
We've observed this kind of process in laboratories. It's sometimes called inductive acceleration. The point is, the CME's energy isn't proportional to the size of the trigger, but to the amount of energy stored in the localized solar flux ropes that the trigger destabilizes. The energy is solar, the trigger is 3 Atlas.
I appreciate you clarifying the reconnection mechanism. That certainly provides a more concrete physical pathway. However, to achieve that level of catastrophic field line reconnection, the object must possess a substantial, highly persistent charge differential to create the necessary shear force, right? Where is the observable evidence, the actual measurable data, that this 5 to 50 kilometer object maintains the necessary magnitude and persistence of charge during its close passage to destabilize solar fields massive enough to fuel those particular CMEs? If the charge characteristics are purely theoretical at this point, the mechanism still feels incomplete.
But we have to focus on the data that confirms the object's stability and unique composition interacting physically. The coronagraph imagery confirms 3 Atlas is where expected, traveling at the calculated velocity, and the massive CMEs occurred precisely during its superior conjunction. The fact that its speed is normal, it's not being ripped apart or dramatically slowed down by some huge interaction, tells us the object is structurally sound, and its magnetic interaction must therefore be highly efficient, localized, and catalytic rather than sustained and disruptive over a large volume. The electromagnetic framework, possibly involving this reconnection, offers the only currently viable physical explanation for a small, stable object having such a profound, targeted, and explosive effect on the sun.
But is that truly the best model, or is it simply the most comfortable one within our existing physics-based lexicon? Which brings us, I think, to the value of this unique dataset versus the potential need to expand our scientific frame entirely.
Look, the data points we have are powerful. The confirmation via the CC01 coronagraph, the expected velocity,
the historical data showing it developed that sunward-facing tail, likely an electrostatic phenomenon, back in July and August. These facts reinforce that 3A Atlas, while unique, is still governed by physical laws we can study, specifically plasma physics and electromagnetism. Our focus should remain on using these confirmed empirical data points to refine our understanding of astrophysical electromagnetism, perhaps extending the Alphen model to account for these unique interstellar travelers.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning, because defining this solely within the confines of our existing astrophysics might be limiting our understanding of an object that is undeniably ancient and exotic. This object's unique, potentially high-density makeup and its vast, unknown journey, it could mean it's not just interacting with our plasma fields, but maybe with the very fabric of our local spacetime in some way we don't fully grasp yet. To truly learn about the early origin and formation of the universe, which is after all the stated goal of studying these objects, perhaps we must embrace the idea that its unique informational field is the true catalyst. Now, if we frame this information field as the structured input that determines the nature of the resonant output, then the systemic results, like the specific timing with the supermoon, the global seismic priming, they start to become more coherent.
The resonance model essentially posits that this object introduces a kind of new standing wave pattern into the solar system that affects established energetic systems, like maybe the Earth's Schumann resonance or its toroidal fields. This could explain the physical coupling for the seismic event. The non-native resonance disrupts the established planetary field integrity, allowing ambient stress, like lunar tides, to more easily trigger a release. Restricting the explanation to localized field dynamics risks, I think, ignoring the object's intrinsic, deep space nature and its potential ability to influence our solar system systemically.
But where is the physical coupling there? If the catalyst is an informational field disrupting Schumann resonance, how do you measure that intermediary step? My model, while, maybe facing challenges in precise scaling, provides a concrete physical force, magnetic field line reconnection, as the step between the object and the CME. Your model describes a magnificent effect, potentially, but the mechanism relies on concepts that are, let's face it, currently outside the realm of empirical verification in this context. The influence is undeniably energetic, yes, and the short-circuiting concept via reconnection remains the most rigorous way I see to explain a massive, targeted energy output from the sun itself, driven by a physical interaction with a highly charged object passing through.
The strength of the holistic model, though, is that it integrates the terrestrial response, which your model has to rely on secondary, enhancing factors to fully explain. The systemic response, the potential seismic implications, the exact timing with the supermoon and the Uranus alignment, it really suggests a deeper level of interaction that resonance and informational fields are uniquely suited to address. It unifies the solar and terrestrial effects into one, albeit less conventional framework.
So, to summarize my position, the evidence, as I see it, overwhelmingly points to 3I LAS being a unique, electromagnetically active interstellar object. The strong correlation between its superior conjunction and the launching of those 3 specific massive CMEs is best explained by it short-circuiting the inner solar system's electrical dynamics. This action is likely achieved through inductive acceleration and magnetic field line reconnection, where the small charged object efficiently triggers the release of massive pre-existing solar energy. This remains, for me, the most rigorous, data-driven physical explanation for the observed energetic interaction.
And from my perspective, while the object is indeed following its calculated orbit, the sheer magnitude of the solar response, coupled with the associated terrestrial correlations, the expected seismic activity, the powerful supermoon influence, the Uranus alignment, all these suggest a deeper, perhaps non-physical interaction at the causal level. The object's ancient, unique resonance and its associated informational field provide a holistic framework for understanding these simultaneous, powerful dynamic effects across our entire system. It suggests the object might be challenging the very structural integrity of our local system's energy fields.
Both frameworks, I think we can agree, acknowledge the incredible power and unique nature of 3I LAS. We are undoubtedly in a dynamically active period, especially as we approach the November 5th and 6th supermoon,
And both models certainly forecast an extreme response in the coming days, though perhaps through different mechanisms.
Absolutely. The material clearly illuminates the need for a multifaceted approach to understanding these singular interstellar visitors. It demands that we either push the absolute limits of established plasma physics, or perhaps expand our accepted scientific frame entirely to account for the systemic impact these ancient travelers seem to have upon our solar system.